Welcome to the Sandersonian Institute of Cosmere Studies, where there's always another secret.
Welcome back to another episode of the Sandersonian Institute of Cosmere Studies. Today is February 4th, 2019, and we are beginning episode 24. In this episode, we are finally returning to Cell and talking about my favorite thing that Brandon has written, The Emperor's Soul. I am Bill, and I am joined, as always, by my timeless co-hosts, Amy and Jordan. Welcome, guys.
Hello.
Hi.
Now, for those of you who listen to the podcast recordings or watch the videos on YouTube, we want to remind you that you, our listeners, can join in and interact with us live via chat as we record each episode at www.twitch.tv/innkeeperstable. We record episodes of the Sandersonian Institute of Cosmere Studies every other Monday night, starting at 7:30 p.m. Pacific Time, 10:30 p.m. Eastern Time. So please join us, take an active part of the discussion, give us something to laugh about outside of what we're talking about, distract us, because
it's fun.
You should. Exactly.
More importantly, you should come just because you then hear conversations about ice cream nations.
Yes.
It's true. And Palpatine.
Yes. Yes, my children.
Because that's definitely a thing.
Palpatine. For the video people, right there.
Yeah, for those of you who can't see, Amy is wearing her Hufflepuff cult robe, and that's what this is, right? The cult of the Badger?
Totally, the cult of the Badger. That's all good. The food's great.
Because that's what people are here for, is to hear us talk about, Harry Potter, right?
Boy, wouldn't that be just a total upset?
The Sandersonian Institute of Cosmere Studies, your favorite Harry Potter podcast.
Emperor Palpatine's soul.
I think at that point, Brandon Sanderson has to physically step in and be like, guys, this has to stop.
No,
it's
not okay.
That's the wrong emperor, I think.
Yes.
But speaking of, so guys, I am so excited. I have been waiting to talk about this for so long. I started listening to The Emperor's Soul again before episode 3 of actually, I think I started listening before episode 2 of of Mistborn Secret History, and just because I wasn't sure how long it was going to go, and so I'm just like, I want to get ready. I want to get ready, and so I've listened to it about 5 times now since then, because that's one thing that's really notable about this. This is one of the shortest things that Brandon's written. It's not quite a short story like Six of the Dusk or Shadows for Silence, but it's not as long as Mistborn Secret History, which surprised me when I realized that.
Yeah. I didn't realize that at all. Of course, my whole background with this story involves horrible burn wounds and moving into a new house, so...
I feel like
most
there's
of
backstory, but I don't know.
So basically when I moved into this house, Bill was nice enough to get a moving truck, which was nice because my family had scheduled a family trip to Hawaii the week we were moving, and so I went to Hawaii, and I put sunscreen everywhere, even my feet, but I played in the sand and it had rubbed off all the sunscreen on my feet, and thus I got home and the tops of my feet got burned pretty bad. Wake up the next day and it was so bad.
Oh man!
Like I couldn't walk very well. It was like I'd sprained both ankles, which led to some fun at LAX. But but luckily I had foresight and had taken both Warbreaker and the Emperor's Soul with me on this trip, and so I completed
Not the actual soul, but the book titled The Emperor's Soul. Okay.
No, I figured people got the context, but no,
It'd probably be hard to get that through.
I am pretty amazing, so I should probably, specify this stuff. But no, and so I read it all with horribly, horribly burned feet, and thus I did not remember much of anything. I remember the book being longer. I don't. Obviously, this is way different now with all of the other stuff that's come out, but Emperor's Soul is probably other than Secret History, the most romantic book that Brandon's written.
Yeah, you could make an argument for a lot of the Stormlight books as well. But
I'm just sort of in a density terms.
Mm-hmm. It's true. So I kind of like the background of this one because for our listeners who aren't aware, Brandon spent 2 years in Korea, and so he had a lot of exposure to Asian culture. And then at another point, he went to China. I think it was part of one of his book tours or something.
I think so, yeah.
And they took him to a museum. And one of the things he noticed was that there were all these different pieces of art that had stamps on them. And apparently what would happen is there were people of note, emperors, and just other high-ranking individuals who would go, they'd see something that they liked, and they would put their personal signet on it. And, so like it's an interesting mindset of I'm going to show my literal stamp of approval on this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they're liking it, and then they take it home and put it on their wall.
No, Jordan, that's not how this works. That's not how any of this works.
Oh, thank you. You got the reference. Referencing commercials, I'm reaching a new low.
It's a commercial that's become a popular meme, so it works.
Yeah.
But it's just, again, an interesting mindset to think, this fine piece of art that someone else has made, I am going to make it better by placing my stamp upon it.
Because I'm that important that it needs to have my stamp on it.
And apparently there was one emperor who would do this all over the place, and he'd even have some of his own poetry inscribed on these pots. And I'm just like...
And he wasn't good at poetry.
Oh, of course not.
It has to be the guy who's terrible, but everyone else, because he's emperor, is telling him, "Oh, I'm sure it's fun." Actually, wow, that leads right into the story, doesn't it?
Doesn't it?
It does.
Okay, so this is a harder story to break down the way we have in the past, because in other books we've just sort of gone through the plot. This book, the plot is very, very brief. Mm-hmm. It's and that's one of the reasons I think this is one of my favorite things that Brandon's written, is that it's some of the most dense writing that he's ever done. Because part of it is he's not really encumbered by plot. And it's almost like a philosophical discussion, several of them, between Shai and Gautona. Mm-hmm. Because you have these two people who are on completely different wavelengths when it comes to morality and when it comes to value and when it comes to just...
background and everything.
Background, exactly. I mean, because you look at Gautona, and, who is he? He's a Grand. He's this ruling race of individuals. He had, for a time, he had the ear of the Emperor, to the point where he was considered almost a grandfather or something. This was somebody who the Emperor greatly admired, but also greatly resented. And then Shai is, this little nothing who grew up in a subjugated province. And I don't know, it's just
by and everything else, yeah.
Yeah, it's a fascinating dichotomy, just putting them right next to each other. And
their conversations are fun to read because it's like they come at things and they're like, wait, you're way different than you're looking at it in an entirely different way than I would have.
But the thing is, and each of them kind of resents the other for their viewpoints. Mm-hmm. But by the end of the book, they've come to both of them have come to respect the other's point of view.
Mm-hmm.
I find the two characters, because this book is very light on plot and very heavy on magic and dialogue.
Mm-hmm. A lot of... I was actually thinking about it this afternoon. It's basically like if all of Brandon's books were one giant series TV show, this is the bottle episode.
Mm-hmm. Very true.
For our listeners who aren't aware, a bottle episode is essentially an episode that shows up in a long-standing show that takes place in just a very small location, which cuts down on the location budget, but they tend to be very, very dialogue heavy and very thematically heavy hitting. Mm-hmm. And so, and that's kind of the reason it's called a bottle episode is because it's essentially a ship in a bottle, and it's just a piece of art contained in a very small space.
I didn't think of it like that, but I do like that comparison. Mm-hmm. But
because she's trapped in that room for 99% of the book.
Yeah,
exactly. In that one
room is basically the only set piece, except for like the very beginning and very end of the story.
Right. Mm-hmm. Well, to the point where the room actually becomes a character.
Kind of, yeah.
Because throughout the whole book, Shai is continually awakening, or waking up and rewriting and improving everything around her.
Yeah, not awakening. That's a different magic system entirely.
And she even expands the room into another one too. Mm-hmm. Like as she takes over part of the next room.
I love when Frava walks in and she's like,
"What?
Is this room bigger? Wait, why is there a fireplace?
Why is there a hearth? What's going on?" And it's like, you weren't using that room, so I took it over.
It's just it's such a cool concept. And okay, so one of the themes that we've mentioned, and I've noticed in a lot of Brandon's works, we talked about it during Secret History. We mentioned it during Way of Kings. And it's a theme that just keeps popping up in Brandon's books, I've noticed. Because it shows up again here. It's do better. Mm-hmm. I mean, the conversation between Shai and Ashravan at the very, very end of the book, mm-hmm. I thought it was absolutely fascinating, and it came up again. And over the course of the whole thing, she talks about, I didn't change it. I made it a better version of what it was. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of what she's been doing over the course of the entire book. She makes each thing she's touching better. The whole concept of leave things better than when you first got there.
When you find that.
To the point, like even the Blood Sealer, who was trying to kill her, she tried to make better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, stop trying to be all like awesome and worldly for her. She wants you to be home.
Go back home. Go be with home. Her. Yeah.
Yeah.
I find her personality very interesting. Both her and Gautona, they sort of feel like amalgams of different Brandon's characters. Yeah. Gautona feels like something between Sazed and Dalinar to me.
Yeah, I can see it.
And Shai feels like a combination of like 4 of my favorite characters rolled in one. She's got a lot of breeze to her in her ability to read people.
Oh yeah.
And manipulate them. She's got a lot of Kelsier to her because she definitely has a flair and likes nice things. And she's a thief, so it fits there. She also has a lot of pre-Kelsier Vin to her. Where or maybe Shallan might be a better comparison, where she has a need to win Gautona's approval, from this father figure. And all these things sort of wrap up together for this. And then on top of it, Shallan's the other comparison I like because she's a scholar, and a very good artist. And so she wraps up all these little character traits into this very unique character who wears glasses on top of it, something we wouldn't see again till White Sands, basically. So. There's not a lot of spectacled people in these worlds because, for the most part, glasses are a somewhat newer invention.
I was this close to wearing my glasses and then I forgot. Because I do have glasses. They're like super weak.
It would have clashed with your Hufflepuff robe.
So I know it would have gone on.
Yeah.
But no, so I don't know. And just having barely read the story before, where I was more reading it to distract myself from, burn pains. But I wasn't focusing on the character. She is a very interesting case study for Brandon. And I love how Gautona is the one who recognizes she's more dangerous for her ability to manipulate people than for her ability to forge things.
Oh, because he's sitting there going, how do you get this information out of the guards? Because they're not telling you. But she just picks it up from being there.
It's true. I also like the concept of manipulating him by being genuine.
Yeah, it was fun.
And Gautona, he sort of says, I think, I'm trying to remember, I think at one point he mentions that you can't manipulate someone by being genuine. And she's like, that's exactly what you're doing. That's
what he's doing, yeah.
It's just the way that you do it. It's just, I don't know. It's a selfless way of doing it, though. It's a way of opening yourself up.
I have something that happened in real life that's sort of similar to that. If you've ever played the game Diplomacy, you know Diplomacy is the best game ever to help you lose friends. It's wonderful like that. It's a World War I simulation for those who don't know what it is. It's think Risk, but with no dice. So everything is all in your ability to negotiate with other people, and nothing prevents you from lying. In fact, they encourage it. The box art for the game is like two guys shaking hands, each holding knives behind their back. It's wonderful. But I had a friend named Davey who, despite all our chicanery and lies and deceptions that were going on, Davey would never lie to you. Davey would tell the truth every single time. Not like a monkey's paw sort of like, oh, I didn't technically. No, like it was very genuine, and it would manipulate you because you knew if he told you something, he wouldn't backstab you. And that has a power and makes people want to ally with you and want to earn your trust because
you're safe.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's how Gautona is. He's very genuine, very safe, and it gets people to trust him and do things they wouldn't do normally. Like, I don't know, become an emperor. Or, I don't know, decide to create... Like, just the little thing that she's running away, she's like, my way out personality, I've added a character to it. She doesn't need to tell him that. And in fact... She's running from a literal army of the dead at that moment, so...
Well, no, I thought she destroyed a lot of them, though.
Without that point, when she's telling him...
This was before.
When she's telling Gautona this.
That's right.
Because she's like, do you have my stamps? He's like, how did you know I would be here?
Here. How did you know I'd have them?
To which it's one of those things where it's like, well, because she's shy.
Enough.
Yep. But what happened with Davey, Jordan?
Oh, Davey always lost, but...
Maybe I'm thinking of a story that my buddy Diesel Martini on the Discord was telling me about. There was a guy who did the same thing that he was playing with. I think it was him. It might have been somebody else. But he'd been playing and always was honest. And then suddenly, one time, he lied. And it brought the whole game down around him. And it was the kind of thing, because he'd played several games in a row. And because of that, everybody always trusted everything he said. And at one point, he just looked and he saw the situation. It was too good to pass up. And so he betrayed somebody, and it blew everybody's minds, and he just ended up dominating in that one turn where everything came to him. And it was like, nobody is ever going to trust you again in your life.
You shattered it, yeah.
But it was just like...
If you're going to destroy your reputation, you might as well do it for something epic. Like winning a game of Diplomacy, because that's hard. It's so hard.
Oh, man.
Yeah. It's like the... what was it? What was the game? The... Actual Mechanics Spacefaring Merchant game that has all sorts of... It's a big MMO. Jordan, you know
Eve.
about this.
Eve Online. Eve Online.
That's where stories come from.
The game I'm so glad I never played, but I'm so glad people are playing it, because then you get the most epic storylines of how people's entire lives are ruined. It's amazing.
Yep. We don't want to go into it too much because that's quite a bit of a deviation from the story. But it's just if you want to find some amazing backstabbing stories. Look up some of the stuff behind EVE Online.
Yeah, 2 years long cons. It's amazing. But no, so we were talking about Shy and improving and making things better and stuff.
Yep. Because again, it's the same theme that I've seen show up in several of Brandon's books, and so I think it's just something that's very important to him is constant improvement, constant progression. You know, never settling for who you are, always trying to become something more.
Well, and one of the other themes I find interesting, and I think in this book more so than others, is how someone who's actually skilled at the magic system doesn't, like, it's not limited to just the magic. It extends out to the rest of their life. And we see a lot of this. Kelsier talking to Vin and explaining all the different ways you're an Allomancer, think like an Allomancer, all that stuff. But Shy takes it to a next level to where when she can't even forge stuff, she says things to herself like, okay, forge your
be a version of yourself.
Yeah, be a version of yourself that can handle this.
Yeah.
And just things like that where she's not actually forging anything, but in a way, because she imagines it kind of does make it happen for her.
Because I mean, if you have enough force of will, even you can make yourself change to temporarily for an extent. You can pretend, and that's kind of what she's doing for some of it. Even with going so far with the fact that she's referencing her Uncle Juan, I think it is,
who never existed. Now
does not exist. Yeah,
I can't remember because the past several times I've done it, I've done an audiobook. Did you read it recently, Amy?
Emperor Soul?
Yeah.
I read it.
Okay. So she talks about Uncle Juan. Is that W-A-N or W-O-N?
Thought it was.
Do you know?
I think it's spelled J-U-A-N.
No, I'm just wondering because her surname is Juan, and so she's Juan Shailu.
W-O-N.
Okay, so it is.
But it's part of in her her personality to erase everything.
I was just wondering if she was referring to him as uncle last name, as opposed to because again,
could be.
Juan is her surname, but that's W-A-N. So anyway, that's beside the point.
And it's hard to tell because I learned a little bit of Chinese. I know some Japanese. I do not speak Korean. I don't speak Thai, any of that. And so I'm sitting there going, I don't know what language exactly he's pulling from because it looks like he's pulling from different ones for different people. And he does reference that there's different countries and they've all been kind of subjugated by the Grands. And Gaotona looks very, like his name looks Japanese to me. Yeah. In the spelling of it. I mean, I don't see how it's written in the actual text, which I don't know if you even made that. But Frava does not look Asian in a way that I know. But I mean, there's lots of other countries, so it could very well be.
It could be
something
like Laotian
else. Or something that Filipino, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, because the way she describes Grands, because he talks about elongated features, that sounds more like tall. A terraceman to me if it weren't for the fact that we don't hear anything about, like darker complexions, which he tends to associate with the terrace.
Sometimes.
Yeah. So I'm not sure exactly what nationality they're supposed to be.
And I don't know that they're supposed to be a nationality.
I mean,
it is a conglomeration.
So it kind of like part of me wants to place them in something, but then I'm like, but they're not really. They're just from a made-up country, so we don't know exactly. Right. But it does kind of remind me of the little bit of the Chinese culture that I know that I have learned, because especially even with just the Grands and how like they go into the government service and like they all have their little roles and you would test in China. Like in ancient China, that you would to become a government official. Yeah. Anyway.
Now, actually, let's talk a little bit about the Rose Empire, because it really is a very interesting setting. First off, as we mentioned at the beginning, it is on Cell, so the same planet where Elantris took place. It's just farther north. So you have Elantris and Arelon, and then you have the Straits, and on the north side of the Straits is Teod. And then there's a mountain pass north of there, and beyond that is the Rose Empire.
Okay, because I wasn't sure exactly where it was. And it was interesting. This time I realized that I think someone from Harathan's race was there.
Fjordal, yeah.
Yeah, because it says someone's in red armor, and I'm like, I saw it this time. I knew there had to be some other connections, and there it was. And I was like,
well, and
oh,
she mentions
okay.
she mentions
Something being in Svordish or something like that,
yeah,
right?
something being written in Svordish, which is.
And I'm like, oh, more things that I feel dumb for not connecting the first time.
Yeah. And also, you know, the mountain passes to the south they were talking about at one point, and Teod being south of there.
I'm not sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
But.
Well, it's interesting because as I remember, because obviously this comes from Arcanum Unbounded, we had the Celish system summary. Mm-hmm. Boy, I should not have said that 3 times. I'm surprised I said that. But the Chris wrote, and she talks about how there's like 3 different kingdoms, and they all sort of like want to pretend that those things are just sort of, you know, so far away. It doesn't really matter. It's a small thing.
Well, especially because Cel is one of the larger planets in the Cosmere, to the point where I think they said it's 1.5 times Cosmere standard, and that's based on Yolen, and Yolen is essentially Earth. Like,
okay.
It's very much an Earth
equivalent.
Well, and in the way the magic systems work, it sort of heightens that that distance, because your power is very much tied to your area.
Right. Well, because Dominion and Devotion have been gushed up into the door, and the door is in the cognitive realm, while most of the other investiture-based shards are more in the spiritual realm, which doesn't rely as much on location.
Well, I think her writing says the spiritual realm doesn't have a location. It's like there's no location based stuff.
Mm-hmm. But which is why actually most Celish magics don't work off of Cel.
Oh, okay.
Which is kind of interesting, because if you look at them, those are some of the more powerful magics.
But they can only be used from a defensive position.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if you look at Aeon Door, you can only do that in Arelon, to the point where they crossed the straits into Teod, and they were still able to access it, but it was much weaker than it was.
And it was the sheer number of people that made it still.
Well, the other thing that Shai mentioned, which stood out to me upon a reread, was that the marks in the stamps resemble my pawn, which is where she's from. Mm-hmm. And it's just sort of like, well, you know, with Elantris, the Aeons are... The basic Aeon looks like the country of Arelon.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing that's interesting, as far as the power of the door and how it fuels the magic and how it's there sort of freely, if you think about it, what they did to the Emperor is very similar to a Returned from Warbreaker, but a Returned needs a constant source of investiture to stay alive. Right. Whereas all the Emperor needs to sort of keep himself together is just stamp yourself every couple of days.
Which
every
links
day.
into the door.
Yeah.
And wear your thing. Yeah, and stamp
But that's all it takes is, just stamp it, you'll be good to go. Like, you just need this little ink thing. And it's like, that doesn't seem like much of a power investment, because the door's magic is just there freely.
Yep.
It's one of those things you're just like, oh, heaven help us if we ever get Nightblood to this place.
But again, you have to be there to access it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, that's a good segue into one of the points that stood out to me. So, Hoid. Where is Hoid in this book?
I did not spot Hoid at all.
He's off screen.
He doesn't appear on screen at all.
Yeah, I didn't realize he was there even off screen.
Hoid is the Imperial fool who betrayed Shai at the very beginning.
I just find it funny that he's now been a fool for some royal in two different books now.
Although,
it's a role that he's pretty good at.
Although, amusingly, in one of them he's the fool, in the other he's the wit.
And in all of them, he's just kind of a jerk that everyone hates.
He's Hoid. Now, the thing that this is based on a word of Brandon that people have asked him about. The reason that Hoid was there is he wanted the Moon Scepter for himself, because and we don't know much about the Moon Scepter other than that's what Shai was trying to steal, and she got betrayed by the Fool. According to Brandon, the Moon Scepter is essentially a Rosetta Stone for all the different Celish magics. So basically, if you understand how to use Forgery, if you have the Moon Scepter, you can use it to figure out how to use Aeon Door or Chai Shan or the Fjordal
Darkor monks.
The Darkor, yeah. And it's just sort of a fascinating concept of, and so of course Hoyd wants this. Mm-hmm. And also according to Brandon, Hoyd has now completely studied it and has all the information from it that he needs. But it's just sort of, I don't know, I just sort of, dang it, Hoyd.
You're too good at what you do.
Well, and at the same time, like brought up by Godless Rebel in chat, that, it was easy to think that maybe he's also manipulating it to get Shai to act, fix this empire for some other Hoyd plot. Hoyd has been around a while. He knows how people work.
Even at this point, because this is, again, one of the earlier story, like, plot-wise or timeline-wise.
It's just one of those things where it's like, maybe he's just like, a twofer.
Yeah, because that's sort of what Hoyd does. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about Forgery.
Yes.
Because I find it really fascinating that you get to see the sort of outsider's perspective on it through Frava and through Gautona. Mm-hmm. And that's the other thing is there is a whole lot of explanation in this book, stuff that could be just considered info dump. But Brandon has worked it into the dialogue so well
that it doesn't feel like it.
That it doesn't feel like this is just a big info dump. We get a whole spiel on the three realms from Shai. But because it's a discussion with Gautona and he's disagreeing with it, suddenly it's just like, okay, first off, how totally accurate is this? Now, the fact that it agrees with stuff we've seen on at least 2 different worlds gives it some credence.
Yeah.
And Shai has also the benefit of my magic works.
It does what it's supposed to do, so... Yeah.
But I love seeing Gautona's skepticism of the wall thinks of itself as a wall.
It's like that's a wall, but it's a wall, and it doesn't think.
It actually ties a little bit to I know this is outside, but this isn't particularly spoilers. At the very, very beginning of Well of Ascension, or not Well of Ascension, of Words of Radiance. Sorry, starts with a W and of.
All W words look the same to you.
I'm not letter racist. No. But it's like at one point we see Yesna seeing the cognitive version of the this is the very beginning in the pre chapters, seeing sort of a cognitive version of the castle itself. Not of this wall or of this, but it's which it's made up of several different things, but it still has an identity of I am this castle. And Shai is explaining the same sort of thing. The wall has been composed of all these pieces of stone, but it still views itself as a wall because that's what it's considered to be. You look at a wall and you don't think, oh, that's a lot of plaster and wood and nails and stuff. You just see, oh, that's a wall. It's one unit. And it sort of develops an identity as that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And the way that she rebuilds Ashravan sort of follows in the same thing. She's finding all these different little experiences and influences on his life. What she's trying to recreate is the whole. But to create the whole, she has to find the individual pieces and makeup and how it makes him.
And how he became the person he was, like how things progressed.
Yeah.
And changed him.
Well, it's fascinating as far as just trying to forge something, how anything can technically be forged into anything else, but the difficulty lies in trying to make it, happen. It needs to be likely. And so,
Possible, yeah.
So the best example I think she gave was the desk, where she's like, "Oh, well, so and so stayed in this
history,
they stored this here. Well, so I just gave it a history where it was cared for, which is a likely outcome, and she sort of just manipulates it, and then there's like, there's an entire mural in here. I found out so and so was sick for like a month, and
he was in the room above me.
Yeah, the room above us, and just she starts going down the list of what could have happened, and then making it so.
Back to the desk, though, that was one of the things, and actually the mural on the wall as well. That was one of the things that really stood out to me, is the fact that she embellished beyond that. But to do that, she had to include specific instructions for certain strokes and certain things. So to actually make that happen, she had to understand how to do it herself.
Yeah.
And so it's not just, it's kind of like if you have, like, she didn't necessarily have the actual painting skill. She did, because we've seen what she painted, but because she understood, she was able to basically program in instructions on how it should be painted and what sorts of strokes should be used. So she didn't paint it herself, but at the same time, she still crafted and created it.
Yeah.
Well, and that's the difference between her and the Rememberers, which is hard to say, and I don't like it. But where they just like, here's some clay, forge it, boom, we're good, let's go.
And it's because they're copying.
Yeah.
And that was the interesting thing, is Gautona accuses her of not having any soul behind the art because she's just copying. When in reality, you look at the Rememberers and they're just copying and it's soulless, but she's creating these masterpieces of art in forgery. Gautona says to her, "You could have been such an artist." She says, "I am one." He says, "No, a real artist." She says, "I am one."
Yep.
And it's because she's creating these masterpieces.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's so cool because that's his plot arc, is seeing the beauty in what she does. And I love the moment when she reveals that she burned the actual painting.
And he's so angry.
Oh, so mad.
You lie. Not this time, old man.
Yeah.
I did not lie. No, I did not lie.
And
then she tells him, and then to top it off, when she tells him why she burned it.
Okay, actually, that's something I really want to talk about.
Okay.
So that discussion that they have, when she says, "I burned it because of him," and she said,
because the painter wanted it burned.
"You've destroyed this masterpiece, and that wasn't for you to do. That didn't belong to you. It belonged to everyone." And the fact that at the very last scene of the book, he's reading the book that she's created, and he's just almost weeping at the emotion of just how amazing a piece of art this is. He just think, this is a work of frenzied genius who's spending days upon days and sleepless nights creating something in a burst of creativity. And then the very last thing he does is he throws it into the fire, just like she had done with that book, because it couldn't be shown. It was this amazing piece of art that was just transcendent, and he did the exact same thing. He threw it into the fire.
There's something to be said for that type of beauty. One of my favorite things talking about, like we can talk about with this podcast, proper audio engineering never gets noticed. And ours has been noticed far too often, and you people need to stop noticing things. But sometimes that's the beauty of art, is the fact that you never notice it. And her, that's her biggest compliment, is if no one notices she did it. Yet at the same time, when she makes like the mural, she makes her forgery marks quite clear because she wants people to know. No,
I'm
check
proud
it.
of my work.
I did
Boom.
this.
Yep. Another forger can come along, inspect my work, and see
say,
what
no,
I've done.
Good job, yeah.
Yeah.
But it's so.
That's the other thing is, again, Gautona's like, well, why wouldn't you hide this? Or was it Gautona or was it Frava?
Frava.
I think it was Frava. It's like, why wouldn't you hide this? And she's like, I'm not trying to fool someone. I'm creating art for people to see. Now, fooling is a part of it.
It depends upon the art.
Yeah. Well, because why did she take the job to steal the Moon Scepter? She wanted to have something of hers on display in the Royal Gallery.
Yeah.
And then, of course, she realizes, I have something of mine on display on the Imperial throne.
Yeah, it's right there. She can't brag about that one either, though.
Now, here's a question for y'all.
Yes.
Was it Ashravan? At the end, after she stamped him, was it him?
I'd like to think it is, but I'm not 100% sure.
Why do you want to think that?
Because I want to think that people can improve themselves, and that given the right nudge, and that, like, I almost got assassinated, and maybe I should remember my roots and go back to the idealist and actually fix things instead of just going along with the bureaucratic, cushy lifestyle, and improve things and be a better person, versus I'm just an automaton who acts like a person but isn't really,
I feel like this ending was very, very Inception.
Oh.
He spins the top, and it ends before you're certain whether it is or not.
Yeah.
This ending gets to a very big philosophical discussion that I've seen about people, like, is free will an illusion? Or are we chemical computers just computing things that come through, and thus we don't have any real choice? And this decision sort of cuts pretty quickly to that. As for, is that Gautona? Or is that Ashravan? I think we have to go to secret history in order to try and fully understand this. And we have to ask ourselves a question. So we see with secret history that when you're alive, you have the three versions of you all together combined. Then you die, and it cuts the physical from the cognitive and spiritual. Now, we know that the cognitive and spiritual still stick around for a while, and depending upon how much you're invested, who you are, and whether or not you have enough willpower, you can stick around for a bit. And then finally the spiritual aspect of you gets pulled to the beyond, and we don't know what's there because it is beyond. It is yonder. And so the question for Ashravan, he got shot in the face.
Back of the head, wasn't it?
I think it was the back of the head.
Either way.
He took a major head wound.
Yeah. Like, if we were playing TF2, it would have played the frying pan hitting sound. But, thank you, Avi. I needed that. The thing, so the question is, was he dead? Is the first question. Now, they healed his body, so could you heal his body in such a way that he wasn't dead, a la Wax, in Bands of Mourning, but hanging on by a thread? They heal the body, and the problem is they can't heal the brain damage, because that's beyond their ability to do stuff. And so he has a perfectly functioning body with a brain that just isn't there.
It doesn't have the neuron connections that it had before.
Or is it a situation where the cognitive got severed and the spiritual went bye-bye? And so I think there's two distinct questions. Is if she brought his soul back, if like it was connected, how does she pull it back from the beyond like that? Or he never actually died, so that connection never got severed, and what she's doing in her forgery basically makes it so that the body, like, she doesn't know how to fix a brain, but she forges a reality where the brain is sort of fixed. And so he's still there.
Here's the way I see it. I see it as, because remember, okay, spoiler alert for the end of the Mistborn series. We'll be finished with this in like a minute, so feel free to skip ahead if you don't want any spoilers. But at the end of the Hero of Ages, we see that Sazed has healed the bodies of Vin and Elend, right? But he's not able to put them back to the point where Vin's just like, I don't think it works that way, Sazed. Well, but I think the difference is like what you were mentioning. I don't think he had quite died. So I think that the connection between the cognitive connection and the body was still there, but it was just a tiny thread. And I think what she was able to do is she basically gave the cognitive self, and that's why his cognitive self wouldn't have necessarily gone entirely to the beyond. Because I personally think it was him. Because Gautona was noticing things that she could not have possibly known. Yeah. Facial expressions that
or
he
little
made.
ticks and different
Gestures,
little things.
Ticks,
that,
exactly.
That you don't always comment on your own self. You're not going to say, oh, I just do this little thing, or whatever.
And so I think that it actually is, it was just this very tenuous connection. And the resealing, the blood, not the blood forgers, but the body
forgers type
thing?
Yeah,
the healers.
Resealers?
The resealers.
It might be resealers, yeah.
They were able to heal him before that connection was entirely severed. And I think that what she did was able to make a full path. Now, would that have worked for, say, Kelsier, if there had been another body that was... If there had been an empty clone body, could she have reforged it so that Kelsier would have come across? I don't know.
No.
So, now I said there's two possibilities, but there's a third one that I delved a bit into the 17th Shard forums, trying to get people's opinions on this very topic, that I hadn't originally considered. But I started with those two because I feel they're the most basic. Okay. The one other thing we aren't considering in this discussion, we have seen Kelsier, who, described by Ruin, I think, was the memory of a man holding together his spiritual self, something like that. Cell has a very, very horrific cognitive realm that ravages things.
Oh.
Sever, cognitive being stuck in there. Well, what does that do to someone's cognitive self when they don't have a body there to anchor them? And so there's a third possibility where Kelsier was 2 out of the 3. He was the spiritual and the cognitive strung together. It could very well be that the spiritual was still very much tied to the body, but the cognitive in this moment of trauma is what got severed. Okay. And what she brought back wasn't what we would tend to, in religious terms, think of as his soul, because spiritual soul, we put one to one. Brandon tends to put the two sort of together in a way that it might be his cognitive self is what got ravaged, and what she brought back wasn't the spiritual component, but was actually the cognitive component. That she, very much how the resealers put back together his physical body, she put back together his mind. Yeah.
Well, and that makes sense because his body was alive. You can have a perfectly whole body like we talked about earlier, but it wouldn't necessarily be alive. The body itself was alive. It had that spark of life in it. It didn't have any response to anything, but, it would respond, like it would drink broth if it was given to him. So it was an actual living body, but it had nothing driving it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's almost like, the body is the car, the soul is the gas, and the
navigation system.
The driver is the cognitive.
Yeah, and so this is the theory that I personally go with myself, that she didn't restore his soul because his soul was always there. It was just she
restored his mind.
Yeah, and to me, I think Brandon hints that this is the real thing in a subtle way. When she talks about resealers and what they do, she talks about how she actually speaks of them in somewhat much more respectful tones than what she does with the Rememberers, because she talks about like, well, what they have to study, which if any of you seen someone go through medical school and what the stuff they memorize, that's all a resealer is. It's just a doctor who has like, if you think about it,
a doctor who doesn't have to worry about actually having, like, who doesn't have to worry about accidentally slipping and cutting an artery.
If I can make a comparison to Kaladin, a surgeon, a surgeon in many ways, all a surgeon is like the Venn diagram crossover between a butcher and an artist, or at least very minimum, a seamstress. Lot of very precise cuts and pokes and sewing
and restitching and everything else. Yeah. And
then the butcher part where you're, it's meat, but and it's actually shown a lot of, like, if like they do personality tests, like artists and surgeons actually have a lot of crossover in their personality types, because it requires that same sort of where your brain operates and that same sort of manual dexterity.
That's awesome.
But it's amazing where, like, she speaks of it that highly, of the physical body and what they do. And if you think about it, what she does is more the cognitive stuff, but very similar, where she's paying attention to the small details that would make a resealer go, oh, but why would you want to, right? That sounds insane. Wow, that sounds boring. You had to read how many histories of this guy? Bone is bone. Come on, people.
It's a bone.
And then the blood dude is just like, why bother with it all? Skeleton army.
Skeleton, that's great.
I played Diablo 3. I liked it being a necromancer. It was great.
Oh, man.
Yeah, commercial and Diablo references in the same episode. I'm doing well.
You are going way outside the normal word thing. Yeah.
I've been exercising lately. I think it's raising my game. Like, was here, now here. Imagine if I actually ate vegetables. That'd be amazing, right?
Raising your game by raising the dead. Exercising and exorcising.
Less in common than you'd think.
Okay, there is one thing that I want to talk about, because I just thought it was kind of neat. There are two particular substances that are talked about in this book that are not things that you would normally hear about. Soulstone and Coalesced. Now, Coalesced, I'm fairly certain, is aluminum. In fact, I had that suspicion for a while, and then I went to the copper mine and I looked up Coalesced, and it gave me the page on aluminum.
Oh, good.
So
I had like no idea. I didn't think about it. I was like, I'm too busy trying to read the book, so I don't think about what the metal is.
But it's just, I think it's kind of cool because there are hints. First off, it can't be forged. Second off, it's not particularly strong. And it's just like, okay, aluminum. All right, there we go. And so but it's interesting that in this book, for some reason, it's referred to by a different name, but it's aluminum.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a different world, so.
I think the other thing I found interesting about that, I'm pretty sure, I'm going to double check here. I'm pretty sure Brandon said, while you can't forge aluminum, you can forge something to be aluminum. I think.
I didn't hear that. I haven't heard that.
I swear I saw it. I'm looking it up. I'm at least 90% sure.
Now, Godless Rebel mentions in chat he doesn't think that Soulstone is Trillium. I don't think Soulstone is Trillium either.
Yeah.
I think Soulstone is either, Aeonium or Skyium or both. Because, remember, Soulstone, it has flecks of another metal in it, right? Or flecks of... So it's white with flecks of red, if I'm remembering properly.
I think so,
So I'm thinking that it's actually a combination of the bodies of Sky and Aeona, a.k.a. Dominion and Devotion. Because it talks about it fell from the sky and it was considered to be the bodies of fallen gods. Well, what fallen gods does Cell have?
Yeah.
They have Aeona and Sky. And although I do think it's interesting that apparently in the past people found it and they carved idols out of it and they worshiped them. And I kind of like her, her concept of why would you worship something you created yourself? But because the thing is with Shy, we get probably one of the most accurate and earliest looks at almost not Yolan religion, but as close as possible, because she also does worship the God beyond.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
She speaks prayers to the God beyond, which we've seen across a few other books. That the term has been mentioned, and so I think that's actually a tie to Adonalsium or something closely tied thereunto.
Mm-hmm. And it seems like the other people in the Rose Empire that she knew of, they worshipped the sun. Is that what it was? I think it was.
All 80 of them.
80 different suns.
80 different suns. Because there's not ever the same sun, or not every day.
Well, and I do find it interesting that there are 80 different factions, I believe, in there.
Yeah, and I think that's probably connected, that there's 80 suns and 80 factions. Which should be insane, trying to keep anything straight.
It seems
I mean,
like
you
80
say that,
be...
but I can name off every single character in Super Smash Brothers, and that's about 80 of them.
90, I think, in fact.
Oh, goodness.
Not there. We're not there yet.
Well, but they don't have to get together and agree on things.
I mean, have you tried to get the Smash community to agree on anything? Let me tell you,
I don't interact with the Smash community because my poor Wii just doesn't play Smash.
Well, let me just tell you, it's a bunch of nerds in a room. They agree on nothing.
Oh, yes.
Oh. I used to be able to do the 151 Pokemon, but I can't anymore. I'm too rusty.
Says the original 151 Pokemon. Yeah. I like that.
Yeah, I could probably do like 50 of them now.
I'm pretty sure they probably had a song for the kids, and here's how you name all 80 sons.
The Pokemon rap. My children watch
glory.
That show.
Wow.
Gotta worship all. Gotta worship all.
No. Wow. But it seems like 80 might be the Celish version of 16.
Could be.
But
I mean, given how Brandon likes to pull there's a bit of truth in everything card in his books, they all have something going for them. If not true, something that you understand what it comes from. I wouldn't be shocked if 80 is somehow important on Cell. And we'll find out more in the sequels that'll be like, oh, that's and whatever. But I do love how Shy's like, no, you worship 80 suns. Each one's a different one.
how just completely patronizing she is to him about it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, 'cause they're both patronizing to each other. That's what's fun about their relationship is without getting too political, how they can, disagree with one another and yet, they still like one another.
And be respectful to each other.
Yeah, it's amazing,
All right. Well, we probably should start wrapping stuff up. I think we've got enough to talk about it for another episode, though. What do y'all think?
Oh, I don't know. I don't think there's any possible way we could tackle things like what is art and
what gives art value,
and who owns art once it's created. I don't think there's that's probably, you couldn't write a dissertation on that.
For those who are listening, my co-hosts are mocking my show notes that I've created because the English major in me, the literary analyst in me, came out as I was writing the show notes for this week.
For the record, I'm actually not mocking you. I'm more just like, for such a short book, this book likes to ask really big questions that entire careers were made on.
It's
and
true.
then
it's
just says,
true.
But hey, look at the dancing skeletons. It's just like
skeletons.
Again, that's the thing that just is so cool about this book is the plot. It's very, very plot light. It's so much more about the theme and about the characters. I mean, the fact that she is studying to fully understand who Ashravan was, to the point where her record of him was more accurate than his own journal.
Yeah.
It kind of reminds me of, if y'all have ever read. I wasn't a super big fan of this series, but I did enjoy the concept. Was Speaker for the Dead by Orson Scott Card.
I read the Bean stuff. I didn't get that far with the other ones.
I really didn't enjoy it, but I loved the concept of what a Speaker for the Dead is. It's a person who goes and tries, after somebody's died, to tell the most accurate account of their life and show who they are. Mm-hmm. It's kind of, it reminds me of Mark Antony's speech in Julius Caesar, where he talks about the evil men do lives after them, the good is often interred with their bones, and where he goes in and he's trying to tell, this is who Caesar was. Mm-hmm. And in The Speaker for the Dead, they tell who a specific person was and understands them. And in this, Shai has to find not the face that Ashravan presented to the world, but who he was inside of his heart of hearts. She says to him, I understand you probably even better than you understand yourself.
Yeah.
Because she just dove in head first and doesn't have the self-preservation prejudices that come with being a person. Because a lot of times it's just natural to hide your faults from yourself. But for her to create the whole human, she has to see every last bit of him.
Yeah, she has to know why he likes the color green, or he hates fish, or all these other things that just you wouldn't think about, but she has to figure out how to make him a whole person.
Other thing that's interesting for her to get the correct idea of who he is how important Gautona is to his life. She had to meet Gautona and understand him. And I love it when she stamps him and he's like, I'm mad at myself.
And his realization of...
And the fact
that
you would think Gautona, who was this man's mentor, would have been able to pick up on that, but he can't. It's the benefit she has of being able to stand back and away from everything. She has perspective on this guy's life that no one else can get because she's getting it from so many different sources. She gets to see it from every angle. She gets to read his journal, know his thoughts, and no one else gets that type of access that she had. And it's rather... I think it's one of Brandon's more clever magic systems, but maybe his best examination of character of anything he's written.
Well, and that's the thing, because she asked for a Grand who knew him. If it had been anybody other than Gautona, she may not have been able to achieve what she did.
Yeah, because Frava is super manipulative with everything, and it sounds like the other two were as well.
I love when she says to him, they are trying to hold their power. You just want Ashravan back. You care for this man like a son, and you just don't want to give up hope that he's in there somewhere still.
Yeah.
Well,
and he went to Ashravan's room first. He didn't care about her escaping as much as, I want to go check, did it work? Is he okay? Is he back?
And he brought her essence marks with him because he's just like, she's going to be there. Like he trusted that she was going to be there and that she'd need this. And he feels like he was manipulated for a minute, but at the same time, she did exactly what she said she was going to do. And it...
The other thing that I love about that entire... Because they have a very complicated relationship where each one's trying to use the other to some regard. Both are using each other very sincerely. But the thing that I find interesting is the question of, he's like, oh, we're just trying to preserve our power. But I think especially with Gautona, who is very sincere, there's also a very real... political argument to be made. Yeah, we can't prove that faction killed Ashravan or tried to have him assassinated, but we're fairly confident and have pretty good evidence in our heads that they did. Right. And if you think that they were willing to kill him to gain power, there is some level of justification of, maybe we shouldn't let them get power because they are willing to kill to get it. Yeah. And so they do have at least
means
a little bit.
They'll be willing to kill to preserve it, too.
Yeah. And so it's one of those things where, okay, maybe, like Fava and the other ones are trying to, hey, could you put a backdoor control in here into him so that I can get this?
They want a puppet instead of getting Ashravan truly back.
But I think Shy is wise enough to understand that, yeah, this isn't going to be good.
Well, and it's funny because she's kind of surprised when Frava comes and she's like, wow, she's being a lot more blatant about this than I thought she'd be. She's being...
You're willing to just come right out and say
it compared to, being more subtle.
That was the other thing I love, is her being like, they think I want to run the underworld. Oh, my goodness.
It's like they know nothing about me.
All right, well, let's start wrapping up. As always, we want to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to keep creating new episodes. The show will continue to be free for everybody, but if you want to support us, even with just $1 or $2 per episode, please go to patreon.com/Cosmere Studies. By becoming a patron, you'll get immediate access to our Discord channel. We've got a bunch of people in there now who have some really interesting discussions, so come on and join in. On Discord, in addition to continuing the discussion about the Cosmere and the show, you will also get bonus content like the 6-7, a collection of 7 pieces of content that the 3 of us find each week that we decide we want to share with you, as well as early access to any bonus content we produce. Beyond that, our patrons are automatically entered into our giveaways. And hey, here's a segue for you.
Oh my goodness!
What do we have going on? Darn straight. What do we have going on today, Amy?
So we have 2 little nifty book holders. I will get one closer to the camera for the lovely audio listeners. So it's I might get closer to the audio.
It's funny
too.
because they still can't see it.
I know, it's terrible. So anyway, so it's got our SICS, SICS on the top, and it's got kind of like our seal, like around our little pictures around the edge part. And you can hold books with it, and it's great. And I have 2, and I'll make them nice and shiny and super smooth. I haven't done the smooth part yet, but they will be. So yes.
By hold books, she means you use them and hold them, and it keeps the book open while you're reading.
You put your thumb through it, and then you can hold the book, and you don't have to worry about it flopping on you and everything.
It's pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
It works for most anything that's not Stormlight sized, but
yeah, you want to be able to hold it with one hand. And I 3D designed them myself and printed them, so yay.
It might work for a Stormlight paperback.
Yeah, Stormlight paperback. Does that exist?
Actually, you might need it for a Stormlight paperback. Yes, it does.
All I know is I think using this as part of with reading Stormlight is actually part of a muscle building program. Because trying to hold up a Stormlight book with one hand, not easy.
No, not so much.
That's an endurance test there.
All right, so just a reminder. So our patrons were automatically entered into this giveaway, and then it's also free for anybody to enter. We put up posts on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and basically called for people to enter that way, no charge. And then, our patrons were just entered automatically as well. Mm-hmm. So we've got a bunch of people who've entered, and I've made a randomized list of all those people, and now we're going to have... Is it Amy or Jordan who's going to do the random
I've
number?
got the number. Okay. Clicking.
All right. So, and this time, because we missed giving our giveaway last month, we're actually going to have 2 winners.
2.
So there will be 2 different names, or he's going to give me 2 different numbers, and I'm going to name 2 different winners that we've got. So
okay. First number is 11. So really hoping it came up 16 again.
Okay, 11 is the Bookish Cookier, who follows us on Instagram. So congrats on that. We will reach out to you on Instagram.
Congrats on your name. I like that.
It's fun. Okay, I'm writing them down just so we have them.
She's got a really cool Instagram. She makes literary cookies, like cookies based on fantasy novels and stuff like that. They're
they're so
really
pretty. Good. Makes me hungry.
So, and Jordan, who is our second winner?
Ironically enough, 7 to go with the 11.
So 7-11. That 7 is Godless Rebel. So he's
hey!
Actually in the chat room right now. So congrats on that. We will contact you to get some contact information and get that shipped out to you as soon as possible.
Yes.
So 7 and 11.
We will be having now that we're above 16. We reached that goal. As long as we stay above that, we're going to be doing this once a month. So
yep.
So if people would like more of these, or if they'd like us to try and find something else too, Just let us know, and
Yeah.
I can get different colors other than just red. Which is what
And
we
we've
have
got some
currently.
other cool prizes incoming as well, but I really
Actually,
like
do we want to tell people about that?
No, not yet.
Okay.
I don't
We
think
have
I don't
things.
think
You don't know what
but-
they are.
but it's we've got some cool stuff upcoming. It's all there's still some stuff to work out, but yeah, it's gonna
LAFO,
be
listen
cool.
and find out.
Yeah. I approve. All right. So again, just thanks to our patrons and thanks to all of you for supporting us and following us on our social media. As we continue to gather patrons, we're hoping to start recording more often than every other week, and hopefully also add on bonus episodes and other neat things just to increase the reach of the show and the different and make sure that you're getting getting your money's worth essentially. So again, to all of our current and past patrons, once again, thank you. It's because of you that we are able to keep making new episodes, and that is just awesome. Now, normally we try and answer questions from our listeners if there's time at the end. Unfortunately, this week we actually have run out of questions. So if you have a question or any feedback for us, we would love to hear it. Let us know what you think of the show. Ask us any questions or crackpot theories that you've got, the aluminum foil hat theories, and just send those in because we'd love to hear from you and we'd love to discuss them on the air. You can send those to cosmerestudies@gmail.com, and we will hopefully read and discuss it on a future episode.
And even if it's not like something for the podcast as far as, this is a topic they should discuss. If you just have feedback for us that I think you do X well, I think this could improve, that's appreciated because that's called constructive criticism. And we enjoy that because otherwise we're sort of just guessing what we think works. And, hey, maybe it amuses ourselves at least.
Yeah,
I totally amused myself today.
We do appreciate constructive criticism. Don't tell us that we're ugly and smell funny, but, just anything that... And I don't know how you'd know that if you're listening to... You've got a better phone than I do, apparently. But
maybe they have Amy's smelly mic. That's a callback to, I think, before we started even recording, so...
This one's not smelly.
Speaking of amusing ourselves, anyway.
Yes.
Oh, boy.
Right.
Speaking of amusing ourselves, actually, we do have our own projects outside of the podcast.
It's on fire.
So why don't we talk about... Each of us just very, very briefly mention a couple things that we've got going on. Jordan, why don't we start with you?
I finally got the video for the Stormlight VR game that we did, posted on YouTube. I'll be linking to it in our Patreon for that, just so that people can easily find it. The other thing is just I stream Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday morning. And I mostly want you to focus on that Saturday morning, where we have Saturday morning Smash Brothers, where I have nostalgic commercials. And you get to wonder not only which amiibo is most powerful, but what indeed is Grizzly Chomps helping us with anyway when he bites into those cupcakes.
Chomp! All right, and where can we find you?
Twitch.tv/SpliceStream.
Cool. And Amy, how about you?
I am on Facebook at Coincidence Cosplay and Props, on Twitter at Coincidence Cosp, because my name is too long, and on Instagram at coincidence_cosplay. And I just finished my Hufflepuff robe with its super huge sleeves, and I'm thinking about turning it into an Infidor Tonks cosplay.
Ooh,
but I'm still
like
working out the details of how do I do Hufflepuff robe mixed with Tonks, because there's like no references as to what she wore when she was a student.
Get a pink wig.
So, I have the pink wig. I haven't tried it on yet. So I have a pink wig, but it's...
And learn how to shapeshift.
Yeah.
Right. That's totally easy. Otherwise,
you have a 3D printer, right?
I don't want to glue plastic onto my face.
Okay.
I know I'm weird. But other than that, I have my Nazgul lined up and random mother. And Queen Eleanor. I got the wigs for that, so I'm going to make Queen Eleanor her wig.
Nice.
So,
all right, and as for me, when I'm not here, I I promise I do still write board game reviews. It's just been sort of my blog has been hibernating. That's over at the Innkeeper's Table at www.innkeeperstable.com. You can follow me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Innkeeper's Table. And actually, you'll want to be following that soon because I'm going to SaltCon, which is a board game convention, at the end of the month, and I'm hoping to post a bunch of stuff on social media while I'm there. So, yeah, keep an eye out for that. I'm going to be posting stuff about the games I'm playing, about some of the new games that they're showcasing there, and that kind of stuff. If you have enjoyed the show, please also head over to iTunes. Give us a 5-star review. It really makes a big difference in bringing in new listeners and just helping people to find the podcast. It helps us rank better on Google and everything else. So, and next to becoming a patron, it's the best way to support us. And, of course, make sure to share the podcast with people that you know who you think would enjoy it. And honestly, who wouldn't enjoy us? We're delightful.
Very.
All right,
And
so
good
before we
looking.
head out,
Yes.
do y'all have any final thoughts before? Now, we're going to talk about it again next week, but if there are any final thoughts about what we've talked about this time?
I just like my hood. It's so fun. Sorry.
Emperor
Or
Palpatine.
audio
As
listeners.
much as I sarcastically just want to say, I too also like her hood. Is just my final thought. I love getting to read this again because I didn't appreciate it the first time, and after reading things like Stormlight 1 through 3 and Secret History, I think it really adds a different depth to the story that wasn't that it was always there, but you couldn't see it. 'Cause again, it goes back to you didn't have the perspective. You needed to fully appreciate what it was Brandon did. And unlike Gautona, I will not throw the book in the fire afterwards.
Well, we're
And
not risking the security of the nation with the book.
That actually leads directly into my final thought, because that scene, I just found it so incredibly powerful this time because of the discussion that they have about her throwing the painting into the fire and how he's just absolutely furious at her. And the fact that spending time with each other changes them both.
Yeah.
Because they're both on such polar ends, and they start to meet in the middle a little bit. I mean, they still have their strong beliefs, but they start to understand each other a bit more. And to the point where he realizes, okay, there are circumstances where this thing that I find absolutely abhorrent may be necessary and may be, in fact, a good thing.
And beautiful, too.
And beautiful, exactly.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Just when you said it, what a great segue into my thought. I'm like, wait, you didn't throw the actual book into a fire, did you?
No, Bill,
No,
don't do it.
no, I didn't.
I thought this was like some sort of extreme cosplay thing you were doing.
It's right here.
Oh, good.
I got my copy right here. It's all good. So,
I
I
actually
feel-
have 2 copies because I have one that has this and Legion, I think, in it together or something.
I didn't know that there was one for those.
I can't remember if it's the
That's
Legion
It's like
or
it's like the
something else.
Mario Duck Hunt version of Brandon Sanderson.
And you also have Arcanum Unbounded, and it's in there.
Oh, so I have
3 copies.
but one's digital.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, in addition to the live episodes of the show that we stream on twitch.tv/Innkeeper's Table every 2 weeks on Monday nights at 7:30 p.m. Pacific Time, 10:30 p.m. Eastern, listeners can find our videos on YouTube or audio versions of the podcast on iTunes, Spotify, and just about anywhere else that you can find podcasts by searching for Cosmere Studies. You can also follow us and contact us through Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook under the profile @Cosmere Studies. For our next episode, we will be finishing up our discussion of the Emperor's Soul, so make sure to join us in chat in 2 weeks on February 18th, 2019. In the meantime, on behalf of Amy, Jordan, and myself, thanks for listening, and remember, there's always,
Always
another
another
secret.
secret. Right there.
Awesome.
I can. It's a big enough hood. I can do it.
I'm sorry, you put the hood up and immediately my thought is, Palpatine was a Hufflepuff?
I knew it.
Okay, we should probably start.